Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Paces team in particular. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to join us in the session today.
Sure. Thanks.
Hi, Justice.
Find out where the rest of our team is. Maybe start with this before I forget. Please feel free to read our, as soon as I find it, put this one up from last week, our antitrust policy notice while we wait for everybody else to join us. This is our antitrust policy notice. We recognize that we often work with a large number of people who would be considered to be competitors in the market. And our interaction with each of you is governed by the Linux Foundation's antitrust policy. You can read more about this policy at lf-charities.org/antitrust-policy. And you may also confer with your own legal counsel if you do. And if you are a member of Linux Foundation, you are also welcome to contact the Linux Foundation's legal counsel if you have any questions or queries about the antitrust policy. I'll leave that up on the screen for a sec while we wait for everybody else to file in. Hey, we have a quorum. So I am going to kick us off. Thank you very much. Let's get rid of that. Okay. For our agenda today, so I have prepared a very large humble pie for myself. So last week when I said that we should be scaling back on these TSC meetings because there's no point in having a meeting for the sake of having a meeting if we have nothing to talk about. And we suddenly have a very, very busy TSC ahead of us today. I'm very happy about that because hopefully that also sets the tone for things to come in the future. We are expecting more and more contributions as Tazama also grows. So the fact that we are actually forced to have our TSCs regularly is a great sign of our growth and our health. So welcome to the TSC. Thank you very much, specifically to Matt for suggesting that we have one before we all run away on various travel engagements. And without much further ado, I'm going to hand over to Foley, who is going to walk us through an update that Cybern is proposing to the relay service itself. So Foley, if I may hand over to you, you are more than welcome to grab the share as long as you are able to. Let me just double check that you are in fact able to share. Yes, you should be.
All right, give me 1 second to bring up a presentation I built.
And that, my apologies, that's not the relay service update. It is the auth-lib update. I'm going to immediately update my presentation and pretend it said that all along.
All right, I was wondering for a second, but I guess we're on the same track. So
Yeah.
cool, Josh, you can see my screen.
Yeah, there we go. Got you.
Cool. So we're talking about the auth provider, and we want to build a more abstraction design for it. So to jump right in, I'm not sure if this is readable. I've got another version that I can zoom in a bit.
It might be worth zooming in on some of the components as you go through them, but I can see. That's great. Yeah, that works.
All right, so just a bit of background. We've got a auth library inside of Tazama, and that auth library currently has a key cloak provider that is the actual IAM provider. And we wanted to extend on the package to introduce another provider for supplying the IAM's functionality to Tazama. And then when we did the code, therefore, we realized that that design is not very future-proof, and every time you have to update the auth library if you want to add a new provider, and that piece didn't really make sense. So we came up with a bit of a new design where there's three main components to it. Whoopsie, there's three main components. That's not. The first one is the microservice app. In this case, that is the application that will be consuming the Tazama auth lib that wants to be able to call logon, for example. So in Tazama, this is the authentication service. And that authentication service is talking to the auth lib. And that auth lib then has the different providers associated with it. So how that works is from the in the new design is from the microservice. The first thing you do is you do an npm install on the auth providers that you want to make use of. So in this case, the Keycloak provider as well as the Cybern provider. So you will do an npm install for those specific provider plugins. These are their own libraries inside of the Tazama LF or anywhere else. So you will do the npm install on your authentication service. From there on, you will load the configurations that you'll require for your different providers. So each of the providers will have their own sets of configurations that you'll need. And so you'll have to load those configurations in your microservice. These configurations can be inside of a database. It can be your env variables. It can be hard-coded for all that matters. The provider is not dictating where that is. Neither is the auth lib. That's one of the highlights from the change to the existing process. So once your microservice has then loaded the configurations for the different providers, it can call initialize on the auth lib. The initialize call will tell the auth lib that I am making use of the Keycloak provider package and or the Cybern auth provider package. So in this initialize method, we'll pass the provider names that we want to make use of, as well as the configuration that the providers will require. At this point, the auth lib is aware of the providers and can then do an import. So it will do a runtime import of the provider packages. Since you have installed them in the base microservice app, your authentication library will be able to pull those imports from your base app. So that is step 3, where it imports the actual packages. Then at step 4, it will store the provider's config as it is given from the initialize lib from the microservice so that it can talk to it in the future. That's step 4. Then at step 5, the auth lib will call a register method on your different providers, giving the provider the config that it requires. So the provider at this point will be able to do a basic test of that config to make sure all the required fields are filled in, for example. It won't do a real connection to its external API or whatever it might be referencing at this point. It will just do a configuration check because at this point, we have not decided yet which of the providers we want to make use of. So after that register function succeeds, the auth lib will be able to store the registered provider classes. So this will then serve as a registry of all the providers that we could talk to. At this point, we know which providers we can make use of. And then at point 7, we actually instantiate one of the providers, one or all. So with a active flag that's part of the initialization call, we can specify which of the providers we actually want to make use of. If there is more than one provider with the active flag, it will do the instantiation to the different providers, to all the different providers. It's only at this point where the different providers will do a real-time check if they can communicate with their external APIs, for example. So after point 7, this is the initialization step. So this is when, for example, on startup of the microservice, this piece will happen. After instantiation of the different providers, the next logical step is when a external party calls get token. So it gives you a username and password, or an email address and a password, or an API key and a password. And then the microservice will then call the auth-lib to say, get me a token. The auth-lib at this point will go to step 9, where it says, call the provider instance, get token method. So at this point, it will do the call to the provider. The provider will do whatever it needs to do to authenticate with its chosen API. Keycloak will talk to the Keycloak API, or Cybrin will talk to the Cybrin API and get the token back. And that's where the process ends. After that, the auth-lib is taking the provider token and signing it with the getting the roles and the claims, and signing the generating and signing the Tazama token. So none of that functionality gets touched. So all of that stays as is. So that's the only piece of the design that's required to change. So on the next slide, I've got a brief list of pros and cons. I'm not sure if I should pause here for questions, or if you want to just pause on the pros and cons slide. Justice, what do you think?
I would pause here for brief questions. I also have to acknowledge that I am cheating a little bit because I had a preview of this, so I had the opportunity to ask all of my silly questions earlier. But if anybody else would like to ask any questions, now might be the time, or I could ask my questions again, because I did learn a lot from the process and closed some gaps in my own understanding. But please, open to the floor if anybody has any questions or concerns about this particular approach. Please go ahead. Sure, Matt.
Hey guys. So given that this is sort of a Cybrin commercial method, are you guys contributing the entire sort of end-to-end authentication method and tool set, so that someone who was not a Cybrin client would be able to use it as well?
I think I'll fill that one. So we are extending the core functionality in Tazama, or intending to extend that. So that's the auth-lib package there. Then if any other provider wishes to then extend the functionality offered in Tazama by adding a plugin that meets the requirements of their specific system, they can build that independently of Tazama, and if they want to, they can host that at Tazama. But that, for example, on the screen that you see there would be a Cybrin authentication provider package that is independent of the authorization library package. And that's the reason why we needed to update the design like this, because at the moment, if we wanted to extend the auth-lib, we would have to do that in one of two ways. We would either have to, everybody would have to fork their own version of it to plug in their own IAM, or they would constantly need to update our core package with their IAM. And then that wasn't an ideal situation, because we didn't really want people's proprietary code living inside the Tazama core code. So we wanted to create an extra layer of abstraction there. So the auth-lib package would be a Tazama component, but the Cybrin auth provider package is a Cybrin component that could be hosted by Tazama or by Cybrin. At that point, it doesn't really matter.
Got it. Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Justice actually has to still answer me if he wants us to contribute the Cyber and Auth provider package. And
I'd
that's,
love to have it, as long as you guys stick around to maintain it.
Cool. So to answer your question, yes, Matt, we will be contributing the Cyber and Auth package. When we document this, and we document it without a secondary package, it's going to be look a bit funny. It's going to be looking like a bit of over engineering for a single package. But I think if we've got both of them and as part of the documentation, we document it as such, I think it will be much more palatable. So, yeah, happy to contribute.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Heidi, any other questions? I think maybe something just to recap for me is where this design impacts the current design is the Keycloak authentication code, or the Keycloak specific code, is currently part of the AuthLib package. So that code will be stripped out and hosted separately from the AuthLib package so that you could utilize the Keycloak code as an independent module then. And then the microservices app, which is in our environment, the authentication services API, will then need to be updated so that it can then discriminate between the various auth provider packages. So it would be configured by default for Keycloak, and then can then very easily, purely through configuration, be extended to include the Cyber and authentication provider package as well. Alrighty. Foley, I think you're free to go to your next slide.
Right, on the next slide. You go. It's the pros and cons. So it's a bit mushy. What is a pro and what is a con? But the clear pros are this design is more maintainable, extensible. So when we want to add new auth providers, it's we don't have to touch anything Tazama related, unless you want to obviously update the authentication service, in which case you will have to install the new provider. But you don't have to touch anything in the authentication library. So if you want to, yeah, so it's more extensible and maintainable that way. If we do make any provider specific changes as well, that will be localized in the provider specific plugin. So it won't touch any of the other providers. Another pro is it's sort of backwards compatible. It's got a big star because it's backward compatible for any consumers of Tazama authentication. So if you are making use of Tazama currently and making use of the authentication service, you won't have to change anything. So your tokens and your behaviors will still be the same way. The only part I'm going to touch on a con here where it's not backwards compatible is if you had written your own logon code, for example, translating username and password into a token, and then consuming the authorlib to generate a Tazama token. If there is something like that out there, that piece is not backwards compatible. As highlighted in the design, there's some new code that you'll have to introduce to install the library specifically yourself. So in theory, it's backwards compatible if you're just using Tazama external code as is. The next pro
Will you
is
move on? Because I didn't quite. You said auth service and you skated around auth-lib. Are you changing auth-lib?
No.
Yes.
So auth-lib, if we're using
wait, yes,
auth-lib
yes,
the way
sorry.
it currently is, it won't. If it's backwards compatible.
Yes, we are changing it, but if you are only using the validate token and claims function from the auth-lib, you will not be impacted. If you are using the auth-lib's services to create your own Tazama token or to engage with Keycloak directly instead of using the authentication service, then you will be impacted.
Brilliant.
Cool. So yeah, so yeah, just to summarize it. So I think for what you're doing, Rob, I think you wouldn't have changes, because you didn't touch the generate token or get token functionality.
No.
It's only the get token part that's affected. Cool. Next piece was it's a future-proof configuration-driven authentication provider selection. So what I mean by that is we can dictate which providers we want to make use of via configuration, where previously that was not possible as all the code is in the authentication library. So as we mentioned on startup, you can install multiple packages and make more than one of them active. But then when you get the token, you can, based on configuration, decide what auth provider should be used. Then the last big pro I can think of was that provider libraries can be anywhere. So it doesn't necessarily have to live in the Tazama LF. And this is the main trigger point that caused us to reconsider our design. Because right now, if we wanted to contribute a Sovereign auth provider, the code had to live in the Tazama LF. But with this design, anyone can write provider libraries that can be anywhere. And if you write or authentication service, you can install your packages from wherever you want. All right, the cons is there's a new configuration design. So currently, the auth lib follows what the rest of Tazama does in interacting from within the libraries to your environment variables directly. The new design says the microservice will interact with wherever the configuration is, and give it to the library. So that's a new design. It doesn't follow the current design, but we think it's better because we are not entirely happy with the way we currently interact with environment variables, and we had wanted to do a redesign of the whole platform to do that anyway. So the new design that we're following in the auth provider libs will be able to adapt to whatever gets designed, because it won't touch the auth lib or the providers. Yeah, so that's a con. Then, as we mentioned, it's not backwards compatible if you were using the code to get your own token, because that's quite a large rework on that piece. The last con is there's more decisions that needs to be made by the developer. For example, you need to decide which providers you want to install. You need to supply the provider-specific configuration, and you need to initialize whichever providers you had wanted to use. In the past, this code was all inside of the auth lib, so you only had to install the auth lib, and then you further had no control over what is being done in the backend. Now that control moves to the developer, but with that control is decisions that you need to make. So by design, it's more decisions for the developer and more control. All right, that's it.
So quick follow-up question then. If we are accepting sort of the Cybrin method alongside the Keycloak method as core, in our public libraries, are we going to? We'll need to, or we should. It seems like, and I would love to understand the differences between the two, and sort of what shortcomings in Keycloak compelled Cybrin to create and maintain this, and then sort of alternately, why would someone pick one versus the other? And that should be in our documentation if we're going to offer those choices.
Cool. We can summarize that in the document. Matt, as a quick reasoning for Cybrin choosing to do our own auth provider is multifold, but Cybrin already has our own rule-based access control as part of the Cybrin platform. So if we were ever to provide a solution where Cybrin and Tazama is deployed together, we wouldn't want someone to have to set up rule-based access control inside of Cybrin and then go into Keycloak and do rule-based access control in Keycloak. So for that access management to be in a central single application, we've already got Cybrin. So in order for us to then give a token to someone based on rules, roles, or security permissions given to a person or a API, we would just be able to set that up inside of Cybrin, and then generate a Cybrin token that can be used to work with the rest of the Tazama platform. So that's the reasoning behind Cybrin building a auth provider.
So I guess I would suggest that the logic of your decision criteria boil down to whether you're a Cybrin customer would maybe be an unsatisfying criteria for an open source product. So maybe there's more, but if there's less, then maybe we take the sort of the change to the to the authentication library, so we can allow for any, but maybe we should consider not taking the Cybrin method again if that's sort of the only decision point as being, yeah. So anyway.
That was exactly the debate that Foley and I had earlier as well. So for me, I'm very much on the fence. If we hosted it, it would be fine, but sure, it is a Cybrin component and it enables access to the Cybrin environment. What I would like to do at the very least is the auth-lib package itself could maintain a registry of people that had gone to the effort of building a plugin for Tazama into their own IAM environments. So
Yeah.
Cybrin would be the first, but anybody else, and it could be a commercial application or it could be a open source application, it doesn't actually matter. And I don't think that there's any harm in us maintaining almost a registry to say that these plugins already exist in the wild. So if you already have one of these authentication systems, your journey to deploy Tazama is just so much easier.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I just wanted to get a sense of sort of what, if we're taking a new method, then let's be clear as to why someone would choose it versus the other one. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I
cool.
think that that highlights one of the main pros for this new design, is that the provider libraries does not have to be in Tazama. So I think that's the main thing, is that even if you go with a new design, the Cybrin auth provider package doesn't have to live in Tazama.
Yeah.
So it's on the picture to make it clear, and if we choose to document it in or out, that's really up to Tazama. But we're happy to contribute it if it makes it easier for other adopters that might have their own platforms see how we did it. But yeah, it's up to the team to accept or not.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.
Foley, I don't know if you have another slide, but I guess the big question is go or no go. From my side, I'm comfortable with this approach. I think it's an elegant solution. It extends our existing functionality with additional abstraction that really opens the platform up to be able to add more providers without actually impacting the existing code once this has been delivered. So I'm all for it, but happy to also take guidance from our other two voting members in the audience.
Yeah, I told you there, but I'm gonna go as well. It seems like an elegant design.
Thank you, Greg. Matt?
Yeah, I'm a go. Very.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's do it.
Do we ask the question now if we should contribute the auth provider plugin, or do we bring it back to the ESC if we want to contribute Cybrin?
Totally your decision, because the way that you have designed this is that Cybrin auth provider package can live anywhere.
Exactly,
so it's totally a question of what you want to do with it.
Cool.
Yeah, I would lean away from hosting it in our open source environment, though. I mean, just otherwise it can be a little bit confusing as to which method should I, which of these should I take? And, I mean, I think we want to probably steer, generally steer the community towards, Keycloak as our, this is the way we natively do things. And if you want to do things other ways, there's, absolutely, it's easy to do, but I don't want to take them down that rabbit hole unless they want to go down that rabbit.
Perfect.
So my 2 cents.
Thank you very much, Matt. So let's leave that then as the sort of the sub decision to the decision. We will reference it, and we'll create a register as part of the auth package README that maintains a register of current, active, and compatible auth provider packages. And then we can certainly link to the Cybrin one from there, but we'll go with hosting the default Keycloak package. And then Cybrin will host the auth package, and then we will build the updated abstraction. Comfortable with that, everyone?
From my side.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, for me.
Thank you very much. So, Foley, I'm going to steal that share back. Thank you very much. Authentication service update. We have about 30 minutes left, so I'm going to breeze through the next part of the presentation because I do want us to get to the core part that we also want to talk about is the data warehousing platform evaluation and selection. So I guess the first thing that we need to talk about is just an overview of the future roadmap and system context of Tazama so that you can get to understand where that data warehouse is going to exist. But the intention of our presentation today was actually to walk you through all of the new features that Tazama was going to introduce over the next few months. We are working towards delivering functionality that can then be implemented in Kumisa, who is the big implementation that we are going to be doing this year that will be providing or driving a lot of these features. So I wanted us to go through that, but I think I may have to go through this very quickly because what we do also want out of our session today is a review of the data warehouse and then also the components and opportunities options that we have there. So without too much time spent on these particular slides, I want to highlight some of the things and the features that we are going to be adding. And then starting here with the data integration SDK. We are working on and have completed the business requirements document for an integration SDK that will allow us or allow a developer to much easier create integration for new types of transactions, new types of events, and to build those data streams into the current transaction monitoring service API and or an adjacent third-party data enrichment API, and also eventually straight into the data warehouse through an API. So the SDK will be able to create code that can transform from a variety of formats, including CSV, XML, and JSON, and then do the transformations inside the API to post that information into Tazama's data model, either for enrichment or evaluation purposes, and then also trigger the evaluation from there. This will eliminate what we used to have as the payment platform adapter pattern so that you can almost surface the exact interfaces that you need straight on the API. Right, so you're going to effectively clone down the API for your implementation, and then you are going to script the development of the endpoints inside that API dynamically. Right, that sounds like a lot, but that's the intention of the data integration SDK, and the purpose of that is to be able to accelerate implementations and deployments. The most time spent for any implementation and deployment is the integration work. So we really want to be able to accelerate the integration work for developers and for customers so that they can get up and running much faster. So that's the data integration SDK. The next one is the relay service itself, the enhancement. So the relay service currently traffics data in REST API, NATS, which is our internal pub sub architecture or utility, and then also RabbitMQ. So what we want to do is to add Kafka to that. In particular, also, if a Moduloop instance wants feedback from Tazama straight into a Kafka topic, Tazama should be able to facilitate that communication. The next one is a big piece. It's a component with a lot of additional functionality. We have completed the business requirement specification. It's currently under review. For the case management system component itself, that was delivered by Lextago. And they are currently working on the business requirement specification for the investigation module now as well. So the case management piece, when we originally started Tazama, we envisaged it as an engine that would plug into a transaction ecosystem. I'll be with you in a sec, Rob, and would then allow you to monitor the transactions in that ecosystem and escalate the alerts to a embedded case management system. But when we started to talk to people in the market, we realized that a lot of the people who want to implement Tazama don't even have a case management system of their own. And while the intention was to be able to have a system integrator bring additional functionality and plug Tazama into their ecosystems, not many people are actually using a system integrator either, right? So we wanted to provide people with a more rounded fraud management experience. So we needed to include case management and investigation management functionality. Rob, you had a question.
Oop. I come off mute. Sorry about that. So the relay service, you're swapping out Rabbit and Nats, or just putting it alongside?
It's alongside. So you
Okay.
can then egress from Tazama in any of your chosen formats.
Cool.
We would also, I think part of that is to add authentication to the REST API service, because I think that's also something where our initial implementation was just a naked REST API call. That also needs to go through some sort of authentication methodology. Okay, and then one additional component here that I wanted to call out is in between the Tazama transaction monitoring service and the case management service, we need what we call an alert triage module. So in any fraud management environment, or even a money laundering management environment where you have to field a lot of these alerts, you are going to find a number of false positive results. The false positive results, if they are not managed properly, will threaten to overwhelm your investigation teams and it reduce their effectiveness. So the alert triage module is almost a pre-screening module that the intention is to be able to reduce the false positive alerts that come out of the system naturally, so that you have far more high priority and important alerts that go to your investigation teams to then be investigated. This is also a component in Tazama where we see an opportunity for an artificial intelligence or machine learning approach. So that component will be developed with that in mind as well. And then finally on this page, model management. So we have already started working, or Lextago has started working on a configuration module that handles the configuration of the rule processors and the typology processor and the network map through a user interface, a visual front end. That ecosystem will be expanded to also provide a rule builder module, and that rule builder itself will be driven through an SDK. We are exploring also a low code, no code user interface for the rule builder and the rule development. But at the very least, we want some sort of rule development SDK that can accelerate the development of rules and give people the appropriate code snippets and starting points that they need to be able to get a new rule up and running as quickly as possible. And we do expect that when people start operating Tazama, they are going to learn about new patterns, new typologies, and new rules that need to be deployed. So we want them to be able to do that as quickly as they can. I'm going to quickly pause here for any other questions before I go over to the next slide with a whole bunch of new information. Rob.
Sorry about this. So the rule builder and the alert triage, currently the triage would need to be cognizant of typologies and rules. If new items being, how are the two things connecting if you're putting something in the middle?
they would have to, so the output of the rule builder would also have to inform the work of the alert triage module. So if the alert triage module is supposed to be able to understand how rules and typologies fit together, then that information will come out of both the configuration module and also the rule builder module. So there has to be communication between the two.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, next slide. And this is the one that I quickly want to get to because we're going to hand off here to our team from Paces, who's going to just walk us through the work that they had done on researching and comparing a variety of data warehousing products. But just for context, the data warehouse is a new additional component for Tazama that will house all of the data that the various Tazama services would use, both for reporting, analytics, the investigation support, and the case management component. And then also in the future, we would expect the modeling for machine learning and AI will be drawn from data that is housed in the data warehouse. And the reason we need a data warehouse in the first place is because the operational data store that exists inside Tazama is exceptionally sensitive to performance. So that database suffers under a heavy load of reads by all of the rule processors to be able to do the real-time evaluations of behavior. So we want to separate the data store that we are using for analytics purposes from the data warehouse that we are using for behavioral and real-time modeling purposes, because otherwise we expect that those processes will crash the performance of the evaluations, and that is something that we can't have in the system at the moment. So a data warehouse is one of the essential new components that we need for the system to be able to maintain operational efficiency. And then if you have a data warehouse, this is also a good point to start your business intelligence, analytics, and reporting component. So that component will have a number of modules. There will be the core reporting component where people with data science skill and can manipulate and access data and run their reports. Typically, that would be through something like Jupyter Notebooks or Jupyter Labs. And then in addition to that, we also want to create an anomaly detection engine that would utilize AI and machine learning to look for new patterns of behavior in transactions and help to discover rules and typologies that we can then build using our rule builder and our configuration module. And then in addition to that, as we have always intended, there should be a calibration or fine-tuning module that can refine the detection behavior of all of the rules and the typologies that have been deployed in the system so far. And then the final component there is a simulation sandbox. So you need to be able to test how your new rules and your typologies are going to perform before you put them in production and you realize that they are performing poorly and they are making things worse. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand over to the Paces team to take us through just the analysis that they had done on the data warehousing. I'm going to stop sharing now and then hand over. Thank you.
Thanks, Justice. Just let me know when you can see my screen.
It is up, thank you.
Wonderful. So I think Justice did a fair bit of a context setting already, so I'll try to jump into the meat of the discussion right away. The objective of the data warehouse stream in the larger implementation project is basically that we need to identify from a source of platforms, a different varying source of platforms, which is best suited to meet our needs. So when I say meet our needs, what we basically need to do is look at the candidate open source data warehousing platforms that are available to us, and then evaluate them. And the purpose of giving you this overview right now is to walk you through our evaluation process. The evaluation itself isn't completed. In fact, we're quite preliminary at this point. But the idea is just to tell you how we are going about this evaluation. It'll give you quite a clear what direction we're heading in. And of course, then we'd be open to understanding if there's anything missing in the way we're going about it, or if there's something we've missed entirely, and perhaps there are more platforms that might require consideration, then that's essentially the idea of doing this with you right now. One key thing to understand before going into the specifics of the data warehouse itself is endpoint. It is important to quantify or qualify rather what would be the sources of data and from where would data be going into the data warehouse itself. We have two types of sources that we've identified so far. The Tazama operational data store itself, which is an MongoDB, that is a key source. At least that's an assumption we're taking at this point, that it is the Tazama operational data source will be pushing data to the data warehouse. And other than that, there are disparate systems. When I say disparate systems, we're going to be having the case management system itself, which will need to push data to the data warehouse. We're going to have other modules that are core to Tazama when it comes to rule typology, when it comes to other areas as well. So a lot of places will have some data store requirement. So the second assumption we've taken at this stage is that there will be a cross-system data store. And as of right now, we're looking at it as a relational database for all intents and purposes. A relational database that may have multiple schemas in it. It has to be agnostic. We're not looking to tie this to any particular database. So we're not looking at this point to say that it'll work only with Oracle or only with Cassandra or only with, for example, let's say MySQL, et cetera, et cetera. It has to be agnostic to any particular platform, but that it will be one single ODS that serves multiple schemas. At least that's an assumption at this point. With that assumption in place, the third specific data store would be the data warehouse itself. So that's the platform that would be the destination, the ODS and other cross-system ODSs pushing data to the data warehouse. The objective of the data warehouse stream itself is to provide a central and consolidated data store. We're going to be pushing, structured and semi-structured, financial and non-financial data from different Tazama modules to this data store. A key requirement, a key aspect is that all of the business intelligence that we are looking to do, and some of these things Justice already walked you through in his roadmap explanation. And to be specific, we're looking at integration with Jupyter Notebook itself. It has to be integratable and interoperable with this data warehouse platform, so that Jupyter Notebooks works with this data warehouse platform. When it comes to enriched data, Rob, just let me go through the 4 points, and then Rob, you're welcome to interject at any time. Thanks. So after business analytics, investigations and case management is going to be another important area that is going to be pushing data to the data warehouse. And that's essentially the objective. Of course, there are other objectives here as well, supporting objectives. And those go into our framework for evaluation, things like alignment of whatever platform we end up choosing with the Tazama's design principles itself. I'll go into that in a bit of a moment, but I'll take your question first, Rob. Please go ahead.
Sorry, trying to get to the mute button every time on this. Unstructured data, you've not classified that. Have you got that coming later, or is that not being considered at the moment?
So what do you mean by unstructured data? Rob,
Word documents, PDFs, evidence, customer service correspondence, stuff that's not in the structured flows that you'd be getting as part of your investigation.
So we're looking to support no SQL, Rob, but a Word document itself, and some of those things don't particularly fall in that direction. So a data store or a data repository being something, but something you could probably analyze that still has some structure to it, may not be fully SQL or relationally structured. So that's why we've said structured and semi-structured, but to be specific, we're looking to support both SQL and NoSQL.
So
Probably
in theory, you could do a form of blob storage. Indexing of that information might be challenging. You'll have to use connectors for that. But Rob is correct that we would also need unstructured data storage, in particular blob storage or binary storage in the system at the same time as the others.
Perfectly fine. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, Tika, Tika is the open source library for that. It's the most commonly used component. It's part of Solar and Lucene and a variety of other products.
Got it.
Thank you,
Got it.
Greg.
Got it. Thanks. Wonderful. All right. I'll move forward. I'm a bit conscious of time here. What we have done at this point is, so the direction we have is, first of all, we have to select from a set of platforms that are Apache 2.0 compliant, or at least are associated with that. So we've identified these 7 platforms. As of right now, the evaluation we've started is fixed on these 7. And I definitely, one of the objectives of this is to, first of all, take the forum's feedback on these 7. You could be very, I mean, it would be quite easy for us to know at this stage that, perhaps there are certain platforms that the TSC does not want to be evaluated. And likewise, if there's a platform that's missing here, then we could add it at this stage. But the framework I'm going to show you next is currently evaluating these 7 platforms. And the idea is that in a couple of weeks of time, we'll come back to Justice and the team, and to this forum if required. I mean, Justice will guide us on how we want to go about it. But we'll come back to you with an evaluation saying, all right, these platforms, this is how they rack up against the evaluation framework. And just before going into a lot of detail, the framework is based on these 2 things. The native capabilities and features of the platforms themselves. So that's the technical area. And second is the alignment with Tazama's data principles. And that's the second area of the framework being used. So, but before going into more detail here, I'll come back to the last slide because I think that was an important one, and I will stop here just to know if there's anything that needs to be identified here. Yeah, please, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, considering the dependency of the data for a lot of the AI services that are being built on top and around, vector database support, how are you considering that as part of your assessment?
Sorry, which database support? Could you come
Vector
again, Rob?
databases.
Vectors.
Vector databases being used by most AIs as their data repositories.
Got it. And so what I'll do for that is I'll jump straight into the factors we've used at this point, and vector databases isn't involved in that analysis. So I think that's something we'll take into it now. We were looking for other areas, specifically if you go into data integrity and flexibility, we were specifically focused on these 4 areas. Support for SQL. No SQL is not mentioned in this list, but that's something we have already added from our discussions with Justice. Support for vector databases wasn't something we identified yet, and that's something we'll take in. But do you know, Rob, because it would really help at this stage, do you know of any of these platforms that they already support vector? I do know that ClickHouse does, at least in theory. I've read about it, but I haven't seen it yet. But apart from ClickHouse, have you seen that in operation yet from any of the other platforms?
Not the ones you've listed. I'm a few of them I wasn't aware of. So
Okay.
Yeah, Rob, they're usually standalone, the vector database. It's usually separate. It works entirely different.
Got it. Look, but I do see the value in what Rob has said, but that does require analysis on my part. So this is probably something I'll touch back on when we come back to you in a couple of weeks' time after doing the analysis. If it's something that is supported by any of these platforms, it's part of mainstream support, or if it's something that might be needed to do, to be done through customization or building on top of it. But I'll get back to you on this in a couple of weeks. ClickHouse, I do know. I mean, again, from marketing collateral, ClickHouse does support vector databases, but what does that actually mean? I don't know. So probably we'll do a small POC or something and come back to you guys in a couple of weeks. But that's good input. And if there's anything else of a similar nature, then that'll really help at this stage to build into the framework for evaluation. Got it. I'll move forward, but if something comes up, please feel free to interject at any point, because from here on out, we're just walking you through the preliminary analysis we've done so far. So apart from these key features that we're looking to that we're looking into, the other things that were significant for us when it comes specifically to Tazama and the way it is right now, we had to identify compatibility with a few key components. A compatibility with NATs, for example, was of significance to us. In most cases, is there any native support for that, or will it require some sort of customization to actively pull data or get data from a NATs topic? That is an area of our evaluation at the moment. So far, ClickHouse seems to be doing better, but again, we do need to run a few POCs here before we give a final verdict. It's not impossible in any of these, by the way. I've said NATS support, it's really means NAT support out of the box, but through some level of customization, it is possible. So that is another important area. Other than that, interfacing with ArangoDB, because ArangoDB, I mean, by definition, for its function, its compatibility or out of the box interoperability with any out of the market platform is a bit of a challenge and does require some management at a middle layer to be able to interface with ArangoDB to push or pull data from there. So again, that's a key area. We're going to see if if any platform provides any ability to minimize the amount of customization that's required. Then that's something we're looking at, and what kind of configurability exists between these two when it comes to ETL. So there are a lot of considerations for us in that area. So what kind of configurations and configurability is available to us to push or pull data from ArangoDB, map it to, let's say, a data warehouse, and so that's the key area that we're looking at in this stream. Other than ArangoDB, the other key area is support for NoSQL. That is something we were already looking at. I've already taken the input on other kinds. So for example, unstructured data like documents that we just said. So we'll build that in here as well. That's going to be the third aspect of this evaluation. We were pretty clear that we already have clarity that Jupyter Notebooks is going to be the platform, or is likely to be the platform at least, when it comes to business intelligence and analytics. So this is an area we've built into the evaluation as well, just to see how natively out of the box kind of support we can get with that. And the last part of our evaluation is, what is the best fit when it comes to Tazama's design principles. So I mean, for example, all of the solutions we're looking at are open source. So that principle is pretty much satisfied. But when we're going into the nitty-gritties, of course, there are some areas that seem better fit than others. Some are more simpler to manage, but then of course there's some drawback to it on the other end. So again, work in progress, but this is the general approach. Happy to get any feedback on the approach itself, and if there's anything we need to build into this, then please, we're open for that. I'll stop here. Thank you.
I would just throw in maybe one consideration, which is sort of the open source model. So as we've seen a couple of times in our history, we've had rug pulls from, sort of those sort of freemium models of open source. And so, if we kind of look to not only the license type, but also sort of what's their business model, would be helpful to avoid not having to rework when we get.
No, completely agreed. We've already, I'm not going into a lot of details right now, but we've already started facing some of those issues, specifically when it comes to areas like security, etc. And that yeah, but I agree. Thanks for pointing that out. That is something that is all in consideration, but we'll be more mindful of it as well from a commercial as well as technical perspective.
Thank you.
I maybe also just want to ask here, if there's anybody in the audience that has a specific metric that they think we are missing when it comes to the evaluation. I think Rob's already picked up on a couple. The blob storage or the binary storage or the unstructured data storage. And then also vector database is useful, I think, for AI and machine learning in the future as well, saves us from having to implement anything else. But are there any other metrics here that anybody would want to recommend that we should also be considering? Or does this look more or less like a complete analysis and the basis for a fair comparison between all of these products?
I don't know if this is nitpicking, but there is one aspect in the scalability and performance on how what the pattern for distributed architecture is of the database. Like if you're having multiple data centers, for example, or if there are multiple sources of information where we have a cluster of these. So would it be like how would that perform there, and would it be like a primary kind of architecture or primary backup, those kind of things I think we need to look at as well.
Thanks for that, Sam. That is a very good call out, because in particular, that is one of the lessons that we've learned from our existing database provider as well. Rob?
Yeah, one of them is how any data can be be forensically locked if there's any way of, the database supports that you've got full forensic tracking of any delta that's happened against a specific data module. When it comes to providing the evidence as part of a court case, anything that can help on that was definitely going to be a bonus.
Thank you for that. I suspect ClickHouse does, but that's only because I know that out of the work that Mojaloop had done to evaluate ClickHouse for the audit storage or audit trail storage. But yes, that's also a good call out, and we can add that to the list of things to consider. Foley?
Yeah, so good question on the scalability. Then next question is regarding the encryption that it supports in flight and at risk. At rest, because I do know that's one of our problems with our current database provider as well. So what type of encryption does it support?
Thank you for that. And also that it should be native encryption. I think the challenge with our current database is that it does support encryption, but it's paywalled. And one of the things that we, to Matt's point as well, we want to try and understand what kind of open source this might be. In theory, all of these are Apache products with the exception of ClickHouse. So we would hope that they subscribe to Apache's version of Apache 2.0, and then there shouldn't really be any paywalled premium features. But again, a good call out, something that we need to explicitly consider so that we don't run into that again.
Got it. Just one point. So all of the other ones, I think I'm pretty much okay with. I have clarity on what we need to do. On the deployment architecture, or at least at the data architecture level, from a point of principle, do we have a preference here that it ought to be distributed, that it ought to be in that manner? I mean, I just want to understand from a metric point of view what constitutes good, great, okay, etc.
So we want to know, I think, what kind of scaling it is, just so that we can use that in our decision making. I don't know that we specifically have a preference, but we do want to be able to insist that this is scalable, and can also run on premises and on cloud, single instance or distributed, right?
Got it. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I maybe give an example for that, just as like when I brought it up?
Please,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
When Mojaloop was choosing MySQL, we wanted to look at libraries that supported I'm trying to avoid that word master, but they call it master, and so it's three primary nodes instead of just one or in even number where there is one primary and one backup. And it also deals. I mean, each database has its own algorithm for like conflict resolution, things like that, especially when recovering from some kind of issues. So we need to look at that as well, I think. Like they'll appoint something as like the primary, and then or they can have like a more of a consensus kind of thing or majority approach. So it'll be good to look at that and understand as well.
Okay, one taken. Got it. Do we have any more points? Justice, anybody?
Not from me at the moment. Maybe just as a sense of next steps, you said that we are going to take the feedback from the TSC now and then reconvene at the TSC the next time to present an updated view of the analysis, and then hopefully be able to pick collectively the tool that we want to go forward with.
Yes, I mean, I'm going to wait for direction from you there, and if that's the approach, perfectly fine. From my side, I think we need just a couple of weeks to finish this analysis,
Perfect.
and make it presentable. So I think any time after that, if that's the way we want to go about it, sure, no worries.
That does work. So can we aim for the 24th of April? Matt, you might still be traveling by then. I think you're still in the Philippines. You're only coming back. So shall we make it the week after that?
That works for me.
Perfect.
Yes, sure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for the analysis. I've mentioned this to the team directly before, but this is very thorough and a really good overview of our requirements combined with the features and comparisons. So both for Yusoban and Sada, who put the work together, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope when we reconvene, let's see, and we can probably come to a decision swiftly. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. And then I just have one slide back left. So if you will give me 5 minutes, I can just put up the last slide. So the last slide that I have here is less about specific components or functionalities, but more about the non-functional requirements that we want to introduce to the system that will improve the system overall. So auditability will affect both the Tazama core functions, but also all of the user interface functions surrounding that. So the config service, case and investigation management, all of those activities and user processes and system processes should be audit logged, and those logs should be persisted and stored in one-way immutable logs, etc., etc. So auditability is going to be new functionality for Tazama, but as a non-functional requirement will be pervasive across the Tazama ecosystem. Identity and access management, we are going to be using where we can the Keycloak access management and integrating that into all of the other components that also need to be access controlled. So it is currently being implemented in the configuration user interface and will also be integrated into any other component that has an open-ended IAM interface so that we can use a single destination for IAM services, and that will be driven through our abstraction. So the work that Foley demoed earlier will then be also applied here, so that if you wanted to change that IAM provider to something else, you should be able to do so. We are also doing taking great care to protect personally identifiable information. Tazama in its core implementation doesn't necessarily rely on PII. So our approach, please don't laugh, to handling PII is to tell people to please not give it to us, right? In the long run, that is probably less effective. And as the system grows in functionality and features, we expect that it would start adopting more data clients would want to put more data into the system, and people are already talking about enriching data with KYC information. And then beyond that, the case and investigation management will certainly have a lot more data than the evaluation services. So it also essentially needs to be able to protect that PII information across the system. Very important for us to also consider this now as we are expanding the range of functionalities in Tazama. Similarly with data security, that is also work that we have already started with the PACES team. So data security has been evaluated, and there's currently a gap analysis underway to point out specific areas of improvement and essential things that we need to consider. And then finally, the big one here is multi-tenancy. I wanted to specifically also mention this one here because it comes up in a number of conversations that we have with potential customers and is already on the table for specific prospects. So we want to make sure that we implement multi-tenancy in the Tazama core itself. So for when evaluations are done, you could properly segregate data by tenant so that you could use the same platform to evaluate transactions across an ecosystem without mixing up the tenants' data or allowing the tenants to see each other's data, and using protection of personally identifiable information, data security, and applying those policies to specific tenants in isolation. That applies to Mojaloop core itself. And then beyond that, the case and investigation management component, the rules and the rules development and configuration components, the analytics components, all of those other components also need to be segregated by tenant. So multi-tenancy becomes a pervasive non-functional requirement across the Tazama ecosystem. And we are going to be building that for the COMISA implementation as well. And then finally, we did have out of the RFP for COMISA, there was a requirement for ISO 27001 compliance. We are going to have a look at exactly what that means for Tazama itself and Tazama's related services, and if there are any requirements that come out of that for functionality or features that we need to build, we'll be documenting the requirements for those, and those will also come back to the TSC for review. And that is everything. I want to quickly pause here. This has been a whistle-stop tour just to cover all of the features. And we will, as always, share this presentation with everybody afterwards, so you can read through these items at your leisure. If you would like a more detailed overview of any of these components, or if you have any questions on any of the components that we've mentioned here today, please reach out to us either on the TSC channel or directly to myself or Greg. I want to maybe just put that out to everybody if there are any questions before we sign off for the evening. No? Cannot believe how much we actually managed to do. We are a little bit over, but thank you very much for staying all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. Have a great day and evening, everyone. And please, if you have any questions about the presentation this evening, please do let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.